It was the kind of night when the rain didn't fall. It pressed down, heavy, relentless, like the city itself was trying to wash away some stain it couldn't scrub out. I lit a cigarette on the fire escape outside my office, the smoke mixing with the mist. That's when the phone rang. I didn't know it then, but that call would pull me into one of the strangest cases of my career. The Vanishing Bride. They tell stories about detectives who stumble into easy cases, missing wallets, cheating husbands, runaway pets. But this wasn't one of those. This was a bride who disappeared on her wedding night. No body, no ransom note, no explanation, just a dress, some blood on the hem, and a church full of people left in stunned silence. I was the detective who took it. I was the detective who solved it. And believe me, this one nearly broke me. Why? Because it wasn't just a disappearance. It was a riddle wrapped in lace, sealed with lies and buried under secrets nobody wanted uncovered. Every lead went nowhere. Every witness seemed unreliable. And every moment that passed meant the trail got colder. People whispered about curses, about dark family histories, about something that should have stayed buried. But I don't believe in curses. I believe in people, and people always leave cracks. What you're about to hear is how I found those cracks, how I followed them into the shadows, and how I uncovered a truth so twisted it still keeps me awake at night. By the end of this story, you'll understand why the Vanishing Bride was never meant to be found. The call came from a priest. His voice shook like he'd been caught in a storm. A bride named Evelyn Hayes had walked down the aisle, smiling, radiant. By the time the vows were supposed to begin, she was gone. Just gone. The church doors still locked from the inside, the guests confused, the groom pale as paper. They searched everywhere, back rooms, side halls, even the bell tower. Nothing. The only thing left behind was her bouquet, tossed on the floor like she'd dropped it mid-step. As a detective, I'd seen runaways before. Cold feet, secret lovers, sudden panic. But this didn't feel like that. Brides don't vanish into thin air with traces of blood on their gown. I drove through the rain that night, headlights cutting through the fog, my mind already piecing together the angles. Weddings are supposed to be celebrations. This one smelled like a crime scene. The church was gothic, old stone and shadows, the kind of place where vows echo like confessions. Guests lingered outside under umbrellas, whispering, shivering. I pushed past them and stepped inside. The smell of incense hung heavy. The aisle stretched before me, lined with candles flickering against the storm seeping through the stained glass. The bouquet still lay there, petals crushed into the floorboards. The groom was slumped in the front pew, staring at nothing. His name was Daniel Whitmore. Banker, polished suit, tie loosened like he'd been strangled by the night itself. "She wouldn't leave me," he muttered. "Not like this." His hands trembled. I believed him, but belief doesn't solve cases. I started walking the perimeter. That's when I noticed the blood, just a smear, barely there, on the corner of her abandoned dress. It wasn't much, but it was enough to tell me this wasn't voluntary. Evelyn hadn't chosen to disappear. Someone had chosen it for her. Then came the first witness, a bridesmaid, young, nervous, eyes darting like a bird in a storm. She swore she saw Evelyn step through a side door minutes before the ceremony, led by someone tall, wearing black. But when I asked who, her voice cracked. She didn't know. Or maybe she didn't want to say. That was the first cliff. A bride in white, led away by a shadow in black. And from there, the ground only got shakier. The next morning, I started digging. First into Evelyn's past. She was 27, a teacher, quiet reputation, no enemies on paper. But every bride has a history, and every history has corners people don't like to sweep. I found whispers about her father's debts, an estranged sister nobody talked about, and a fiancé who seemed too perfect for his own good. When I questioned Daniel again, he insisted Evelyn was his world. But as a detective, I don't take worlds at face value. His alibi was airtight. He'd been standing in plain sight when she vanished. Still, something in his eyes told me he was hiding something. Not guilt, fear. I talked to the maid of honor next. She cracked under pressure, said Evelyn had been receiving letters for weeks leading up to the wedding. Handwritten, no return address. The letters warned her not to go through with it. claimed she'd pay the price if she did. Evelyn had kept them hidden, until now. That changed everything. Because threats mean motive, and motives mean suspects. I traced the handwriting, messy, uneven. It belonged to someone desperate, someone emotional, not a professional, but no one at the wedding fit that profile. Everyone was either family, polished, or plastered with smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. Then came the break, or so I thought. A hotel clerk swore she saw Evelyn the night before the wedding, meeting with a man in the lobby. Tall, dark coat, same description as the bridesmaid's mysterious figure. Only problem, the security cameras had been wiped. Convenient. Too convenient. At that point, I started to wonder if Evelyn had planned her own disappearance. Maybe the letters had gotten to her. Maybe she was running from Daniel or from her family's expectations. But then the blood. I kept coming back to that smear of blood. People don't leave blood behind if they're running away by choice. The case twisted tighter when I found Evelyn's sister. She lived 3 states over. A woman with the same sharp eyes but a colder smile. She hadn't been invited to the wedding. Claimed she and Evelyn hadn't spoken in years. But her voice cracked when she said Evelyn always followed her heart even when it killed her. A strange choice of words. I didn't forget it. But what I found next made the whole puzzle darker. In Evelyn's apartment, hidden behind a dresser drawer, I found another wedding dress. Identical. Except this one was torn, stained, and old. It looked like it had been worn once before, years ago. That discovery sent chills through me, because it meant one thing. Evelyn had been living with a ghost of a past nobody wanted to acknowledge, and that ghost was about to become the key to everything. That old dress sat in my hands like a riddle stitched in silk. Torn seams, faded lace, a faint scent of perfume that didn't belong to Evelyn. Brides don't keep spare dresses hidden in secret drawers, unless they mean something, unless they're reminders of a story buried deeper than a family wants to admit. I asked myself the only question that mattered: whose dress was it before it was hers? I took the dress to the seamstress listed on the original receipt. She was old, hands like worn parchment, eyes sharp as needles. When I laid the garment down, she froze. "This isn't Evelyn's," she whispered. "I made this for her mother." She hesitated. But she never wore it. Not on her wedding day. Her mother. Dead nearly 20 years. Cause of death. Accident. Fell down a flight of stairs, they said. But standing in that dim tailor shop, rain smearing the window outside, I realized the Hayes family's tragedies weren't accidents. They were patterns. Back at my office, I poured a drink and stared at the caseboard. Evelyn. Her missing body. The groom. The mysterious figure in black. The letters. And now this dress, an echo of a past marriage that never happened. A ghost, following the daughter into her own ceremony. Patterns, always patterns. The next step was Evelyn's father. A man with too much money for a teacher's salary, debts piling up behind his polished grin. He greeted me in his study, cigar smoke thick in the air. His hands trembled when I mentioned the dress. "That's ancient history," he said. "Has nothing to do with Evelyn." But I could see the sweat rolling down his temple. Ancient history has a way of catching up when you try too hard to bury it. That night I went back to the church. Empty now, except for the echoes of vows that never got spoken. I walked the halls, checked the side doors. That's when I found it. Scratches on the wood near the back exit. Deep, frantic, like someone had been dragged. I pressed my fingers over the grooves and felt the truth sinking in. Evelyn hadn't left willingly. She'd been pulled. I followed the trail outside into the churchyard. Mud, rain. Footprints blurred, but one thing stood out. A heel snapped off, half buried near the hedges. Evelyn's. I pocketed it. She had fought. That meant she was alive when she left the church. The question was, where did they take her? The next morning, I visited Daniel again. He was drowning in whiskey and grief. When I showed him the heel, his eyes widened. "She never wore cheap shoes," he muttered. "If that broke, someone forced her to run." That cracked him open. He confessed Evelyn had been worried about the wedding for weeks, but not because of him. She'd confessed late at night that someone was watching her. A shadow outside her apartment, phone calls where nobody spoke, and then the letters. Daniel had begged her to go to the police, but she refused. She said, "It was family business," he whispered. Family business, always the family. I turned back to the sister. She was sharper than she let on. When I pressed her about the dress, her mask slipped. She admitted their mother hadn't fallen by accident. She died the night before her own wedding. No one ever proved it, but whispers said their father had been involved. Money, debts, maybe even betrayal. Evelyn had grown up haunted by that story, by a fear that the same fate would follow her, and now it had. Still, something didn't add up. If the father had debts, maybe someone had taken Evelyn as leverage, a ransom that never came. Or maybe the groom wasn't as innocent as he looked. I dug deeper into Daniel. Bank records, phone logs. That's when I found it. A series of payments to a private investigator. Strange for a man about to marry the love of his life. When I confronted him, Daniel broke down. "I had to know," he said. "Evelyn, she was hiding things from me. Disappearing at night, keeping secrets. I thought she was seeing someone else. I hired the PI to follow her. But the night before the wedding, the investigator vanished too. Never filed his report. Never called back. Now I had 2 disappearances, and a gut feeling they were linked. I tracked the PI's car to a motel on the outskirts of town. Room 12. The place smelled of damp carpet and stale smoke. Inside, I found his notes. Pages filled with Evelyn's routines, her walk home from school, her stops at the florist, her meetings with someone he labeled only as X. The last entry chilled me. Meeting at the church. 5 p.m. day of wedding, possible handoff. The PI never made it out. Evelyn never made it back. Whoever X was, they had both. Then came the moment that nearly stopped my heart. In the motel closet, taped under the shelf, I found Evelyn's engagement ring. Blood dried on the band. I knew then this wasn't about debts or cold feet. This was about silence. Someone wanted Evelyn gone not for money, not for jealousy, but for secrets. And if those secrets were tied to her mother's death, then I was staring at a legacy of violence passed down like an heirloom. But what I found next, that was the crack that split the case wide open. The motel room felt like a coffin stuffed with answers nobody wanted me to dig up. I pocketed the bloodied ring, knowing it wasn't just evidence, it was a message. Someone had kept it there on purpose, hidden but not destroyed. Like they wanted me to find it, but only if I went deep enough. That's the thing about puzzles. Sometimes the culprit doesn't just hide the pieces. They scatter them, daring you to put it back together. I stared at the last page of the PI's notes. Meeting at the church. 5 p.m. That was an hour before the ceremony, which meant Evelyn hadn't simply shown up, smiled, and vanished. She'd walked into that church already carrying a secret meeting under her veil. I retraced her steps. The rain was relentless as I pulled into the churchyard again. I walked through the back hall where the bridesmaid swore she saw the figure in black. The wood still groaned under my shoes, every shadow stretching longer than it should. I pushed open the door to the vestry. That's when I saw it, a scuff mark on the stone floor. Fresh, faint, but there. Something heavy had been dragged across. I followed the trail to a locked closet, a janitor's space. When I pried it open, the smell hit me first. Iron, dust, old wood. Inside, I found rope fibers and duct tape. Used. Not much left, but enough to know someone had bound Evelyn here before slipping her out. The church wasn't just the scene, it was the cage. I leaned against the wall, piecing it together. Whoever X was, they'd gotten inside the church unnoticed. They'd arranged a meeting with Evelyn. She trusted them enough to follow. And then, instead of words, she got restraints. But why would she trust them? That's when my eyes landed on a photo tacked to the church's community board. A charity event, a year ago. Faces smiling, champagne glasses raised. And there, standing just behind Evelyn, was the priest who'd called me. His hand on her shoulder, his smile too tight. The priest. I went back to him that night. His study smelled of wax and damp stone. I asked him straight out, "Did Evelyn ever confide in you? Did she mention threats?" At first he denied it, but his fingers fidgeted with the rosary on his desk, beads clattering like teeth. Finally, he cracked. She was frightened, he whispered. Not of Daniel, not of strangers, of her own blood. She said her family carried darkness, that her mother didn't die the way people think. I pressed harder. He admitted Evelyn had come to him weeks before, asking if he could help her disappear. She wanted out, he said. She didn't want the wedding. She didn't want the lies. She wanted freedom. But his eyes betrayed him. The priest wasn't telling me everything. He wasn't just a confidant. He was involved. I left the rectory with my gut on fire. Too many threads, too many masks. Evelyn's family hiding the mother's death, a groom drowning in fear, a sister with cold eyes, a father in debt. And now a priest who admitted she wanted to disappear. But none of them explained the PI's blood, or the rope or the ring taped under a shelf. That night, someone tried to shut me up. I was driving back to my office, rain slicing the windshield, when the headlights in my rear view grew too close. A black sedan, no plates. I pushed the gas. So did they. They followed me through the industrial district, tires screeching on wet pavement. I cut sharp into an alley, engine roaring, heart pounding. But the sedan didn't slow, it rammed me. Metal screamed, I spun out, crashed against a loading dock. By the time I stumbled out, gun drawn, the sedan was gone, just taillights vanishing into the storm. That was no warning. That was a kill attempt, which meant I was getting close. I spent the next day chasing records, Evelyn's mother's death, buried under accident reports. But there it was, an autopsy note that didn't match. Broken ribs inconsistent with a fall, bruises on her wrists. Someone had staged it. Someone had made it look like Stairs had claimed her. And Evelyn had grown up knowing. That's why she feared the wedding wasn't just cursed, it was a repetition, a cycle. I pinned the documents to my board, my office walls now bleeding with photographs and strings. That's when the breakthrough hit me like a bullet. It wasn't about Evelyn. It was about lineage, her mother's death, Evelyn's disappearance. Both women tied to the same man, the father. He'd covered one death. Now Evelyn had threatened to uncover it, and that meant he had motive. He wasn't just a grieving patriarch with debts. He was a man desperate to keep his house of cards standing. I stormed back to his mansion, storm clouds crackling overhead. He greeted me with his polished smile, but when I threw the autopsy report on his desk, the color drained from his face. "You've been digging where you shouldn't, Detective," he said quietly. "Your daughter trusted the wrong people," I shot back. "And your wife paid the same price years ago. The difference is I'm not going to let this one vanish." For a moment, silence. Then his mask cracked into rage. "You don't understand. Evelyn wasn't strong enough. She was going to ruin everything." I leaned in. "Where is she?" He didn't answer, but his eyes flicked, just for a second, toward the window overlooking the garden shed. It was instinct, and it was all I needed. I left him seething in his study and walked out into the rain. The shed was locked. I kicked it open, and inside I found the truth I'd been hunting. A chair, rope, a strip of torn lace, and a trail of blood leading to a trapdoor. I pulled it open. The stench hit me like a fist. Damp earth, rot, and below, movement, a shadow shifting in the dark. "Detective." A voice, weak, trembling. It was Evelyn, alive, barely. That was the breakthrough. But saving her? That meant confrontation, and I knew the father wasn't going to let me walk her out of there alive. Her voice barely rose above the rain hammering the roof. I dropped into the crawl space, flashlight cutting through the dark. Evelyn sat shackled to a beam, wrists raw from the rope. Mud streaked her white gown, turning it into a ghost of itself. Her eyes, wild, broken but still alive, locked on mine. "Easy," I whispered, crouching beside her. My knife cut through the bindings, each slice echoing like a gunshot in the silence. "You're safe now." She shook her head, lips trembling. "No, not safe. He won't let me leave." Before I could answer, a shadow fell across the trapdoor. Heavy footsteps, slow, deliberate. The father. I shoved Evelyn behind me, gun drawn. His silhouette filled the doorway, rain dripping from his coat, eyes burning with something beyond rage. Desperation. "You shouldn't have come here, Detective," he said, voice calm in that way only liars and killers manage. "She was never meant to marry, never meant to carry this curse further." I held my ground. "You killed her mother. Now you tried to erase your daughter for what? Reputation? Money?" His jaw tightened. "For survival. You don't know what it means to build an empire from dirt, to hold it together with blood and silence." He stepped closer. "Evelyn wanted to ruin that. She wanted the truth to burn us. I couldn't let her." I kept my gun steady, though my heart hammered. This isn't about empire. It's about control. You couldn't stand that 2 women in your life wanted freedom. So you locked them away, one in a coffin, one in a cellar. For the first time, his mask slipped. His hand twitched toward his jacket. I didn't wait. One move from him and Evelyn was gone again, this time forever. I fired. The shot rang out, deafening in the confined space. His body collapsed against the trapdoor frame, eyes wide in shock before the light left them. Evelyn gasped behind me, hands covering her mouth. The rain outside swallowed the silence. I pulled her out, half carrying her into the storm. She clutched my arm, shivering gown dragging through mud. Every step felt like lifting her from a grave. By the time I got her to the road, sirens cut through the night. Backup. Ambulance. She was alive, and for once that word meant something. But cases like these never end with clean victories. They end with scars. Evelyn recovered slowly. Physically, she was fine. Mentally, well, nobody walks out of chains the same as they went in. The wedding never happened, of course. Daniel visited her in the hospital, but the way she looked at him told me she wasn't stepping back into that world. She'd tasted too much truth to pretend at happily ever after. The papers called it The Vanishing Bride Mystery Solved. Neat headline. But they didn't print the details. The bloody ring, the secret dress, the lineage of lies. Those details stay with me, burned into my memory like cigarette ash. Because this case wasn't about a missing bride. It was about history repeating itself. A mother silenced, a daughter nearly erased, and a man so terrified of weakness that he strangled his own blood to keep his world intact. When I sat back in my office weeks later, glass of bourbon sweating in my hand, I thought about Evelyn's words in that cellar. "He won't let me leave." She wasn't wrong. Even with him dead, the chains he'd forged out of fear and control will haunt her forever. That's the thing about shadows. They don't vanish when the light comes. They linger, they follow. As a detective, I've learned every case has 2 endings. The one you write in the report and the one that follows you in the quiet hours of the night. This one still walks beside me like a ghost in a wedding veil. Evelyn disappeared forever that day. Not her body, her innocence, her faith, maybe even her future. She survived, but she'll never be the same. And neither will I. So if you're asking what happened to the vanishing bride, she was found. But in the ways that matter most, she's still missing. That's the truth of it. That's the story I carry. And if you want more stories like this, cases that sink their claws in and never let go, stick around. Because this city never sleeps. And as long as the shadows keep moving, I'll be here. Detective Logan. Watching, waiting. Because the next case is already out there. And it's coming.